Hey there, we're back for another little episode of Bryan Answers Questions. Nobody actually asked a question this time. That's okay. I'm going to go ahead and talk about some things that I've seen come up a lot on various comments. One of the things that people talk about is a truss rod, and they say, does it matter that the Authentics, for instance, don't have a truss rod? And they do have a truss rod that's just a non-adjustable truss rod. So just make sure you understand the difference between a non-adjustable truss rod and an adjustable truss rod. To answer the question, am I concerned about a non-adjustable truss rod on a guitar? No, not necessarily, as long as it is a good quality non-adjustable truss rod. So the Martin Authentics, for instance, is the one that this comment normally comes up on, and they have the T-bar, so it's like this, and big bar down here. You've got two forces going on. You've got this force here. Now this flat force would be relatively unstable, but this force here is an I-beam. So what you have here is half of an I-beam in this truss rod, and that's a very, very strong configuration. The top one would help prevent it from twisting like this. When it's welded on right here, it's going to keep it from twisting. You see, it can't twist without something breaking. This one is rigid. It's like a rudder on a ship. So your neck resists twisting a lot because this can't move without moving the entire neck. And for a rod that runs the length of the neck, for it to twist, no, that's a pretty stable rod. This direction is tremendously strong at preventing this sort of force, because again, for this rod like this to bend, gosh, that's strong. I mean, that's why they make I-beams in construction. So you have basically half of an I-beam on a Martin non-adjustable T-rod. Now let me grab this guitar here. This is my one of my Prue guitars, and this is an OMD. This is the first actual OMD ever made. It has a non-adjustable truss rod on it. There's nothing here, it's non-adjustable. This one is a carbon fiber non-adjustable truss rod. Now in the carbon fiber is strong for the weight, but it's not necessarily stronger than steel. And on this particular guitar, Mario Prue used a smaller carbon truss rod than he's using today, and the neck did, bend up a little bit. And so the way that a non-adjustable rod is adjusted, when it needs to be adjusted, if it needs to be adjusted. And some of them may need to be adjusted because after a guitar's been strung up for a year or two or something like that, that's a lot of force, and it may bow a little bit. I like really flat relief, and so a little bit of movement might be too much for me, might be too much for you. So the way to adjust a non-adjustable truss rod is two ways. You come in here and pull a couple of frets right here. Getting over here, you can see the camera. You pull maybe the first 5 frets, and you can reshape the fingerboard a little bit. And again, if you're only moving 3 or 4 thousandths of an inch, not much, it's not going to take a whole lot of movement right here. Most of your sanding is going to be just right here, and then there's going to be a lot less sanding here. So you're going to put a little bit more of a bow right back in here. That's what I think I did with this guitar. I don't remember. I did it in the first maybe year or two, as the carbon fiber rod gave the guitar a little bit too much relief. So that's one option. The second option is to use compression fretting. And your fret, again, is a T. So you've got a crown and you've got a tang down in here. And you can use a bigger tang like this to put a little bit more force into the fret slots. That typically won't actually make the neck bow, but it will hold the neck in place a little bit better. It will make it bow just a little bit. And sometimes that's enough, sometimes that's not enough. You'll have to put your frets in there. You'll have to check the relief. You may have to pull those frets. You may have to put a little bit wider tang. If you put too wide of a tang, you may end up with a back bow, which you don't want. So doing compression fretting is a real trial and error art. And typically what I do is put like a wide tang here, and a wide tang here, and a wide tang here. String it up again, or I weight the headstock and I weight the body to mimic string tension, and I can kind of tell from that how it's going to look. So I test a couple of frets and see how the guitar is reacting to that. Then put a regular tang in on this fret, a regular tang in on this fret. Maybe I go with the tang that's in between. You know, it's a trial and error and experienced process. You can use a combination of those two techniques too. You can take a little bit, just a little bit of material off right here, use your compression fretting. The other thing that I found about fretting is that if you use glue in there, it's not really to hold the fret in, it's to fill up all that airspace. So if you fill up the slot with the bottled hide glue, it doesn't even have to be a very strong glue. Fill it up, put a little bit of tension on the neck. You know, again, I've got you can see it in one of my videos where I prop the headstock up and weight the body to mimic the string tension. What I'll do is the opposite of that. Put a pad in here, weight here and weight here to create a little bit of bow in that neck. Let the glue dry overnight, and then when you string it up, that glue actually has makes the effect of a wider tang, and that's a pretty good way to do it too. So you've got a variety of techniques. You may use a combination of them to do that. Once you have taken care of a non-adjustable truss rod problems, then you're good to go. So on this Prue guitar, it's a 2002, and I did a little bit of work on the fret, on the fingerboard, right away, like in the first year or two. Took a little bit of relief out, and I haven't ever had to touch it since. So once you get it stable, it's pretty stable. The ones that really tend to move are the ebony truss rods, and you know, there was a period there during the wartime, World War II time, when they used ebony truss rods, and those can move, and they're a little bit more reliant upon that fret tension. But again, generally, once you've taken care of it, they're good, you know, for quite a while. But the T-bar that Martin uses on the Authentics, that's a super strong truss rod, and once you get it where you like it, it's just generally not going to move. The other factor you've got to think about if you're getting too much relief on your neck is to check your humidity, because the fingerboard is important. It's made out of wood, you know, and if the wood dries out, what happens is it'll shrink, and then you get an increase in relief. So I don't like sound hole humidifiers, you know, where you put the plastic thing on the rubber thing and you seal the humidity inside the guitar. I don't like those that much because the neck needs some humidity too. So if you've gotten a sudden increase in relief on a non-adjustable truss rod, you might think about your humidity. Are you getting humidity into the neck also? And if you feel, you know, your fret ends, you feel sharp fret ends, and that's a sure sign of fingerboard shrinkage. So be aware of that. And again, that's another technique. It doesn't make any sense to knock the relief out of a neck and then you know, let it dry out, because then it's going to cause you issues. So that's a few things to think about the non-adjustable truss rods. Another question that comes up a lot is tightening, and people want to know whether you go counterclockwise or clockwise on it. Well, to me, that almost shows a lack of understanding about how the truss rod works. And I've got videos on all the various types of truss rods and how they work. So for me, really the most important thing about any kind of work, whether it's on motorcycles or guitars or working on your furnace or anything like that, is you need to understand how it works. So when I demonstrate on there that when you tighten the nut, it makes the rod bow backwards, then the concept of that is that you tighten the nut, it makes the neck bow backwards, that reduces the relief. So then the question is kind of like, it raises a little bit of a red flag on me, like, well, do you really understand the concept here? Because you need to tighten that rod in order to reduce your relief. And so when someone asks, do I go clockwise or counterclockwise, I think, you really understand the concept here. So I hesitate to say clockwise. The other thing, I definitely don't like lefty loosey, righty tighty, because that depends on where you are on the guitar. So if you take this is a wrench, and I'm going to put it in. Let me adjust my camera just a little bit so you can see this a little bit better. Hang on with me. I'm on the iPad again here. I still haven't found my camera. Maybe I will find it one of these days. It's in a box somewhere. So I'm going to try to get up a little bit. So your truss rod nut is right here. So if you go this way to tighten, is that left or is that right? Because if you look at it from this direction, which way is it going? Okay? But if you're over here, this way, which way is it going? To me, this one's going right now. And this one is going left. Same direction, clockwise, counterclockwise, but this one's going left. This one's going to the right. So lefty, loosey, righty, tighty, it's a circular motion. And it depends on whether you start here, or you might have your wrench at the bottom and go this way. You see? And sometimes that'll happen. Sometimes you can't access from the top and go over. Sometimes you've got to put the wrench inside the guitar and work it from the inside of the guitar. And the same thing happens up here if you have a headstock adjustment. Are you going from here, or are you going from here? So there's a surefire way to determine whether you're going to tighten or whether you're going to loosen. You pick up a bottle like this, and you pretend that this is the rod and this is the nut. And so do you want to tighten it, or do you want to loosen it? And a lot of times, if I'm working on, say, a motorcycle, and I'm upside down on the motorcycle, working on the oil thing or something like that, and I'm thinking, I'm going to be sure which way it goes, because I sure don't want to strip that thing out. A lot of times what I do is I actually go to the gas cap on the motorcycle, and I set the wrench as if I want to take the gas cap off or put the gas cap on. So I put the wrench on here, and I set it to take this lid off. So this way. And then I get upside down and I do it. The other way is you just visualize it in your head, which way is that thing going to go. So you have to understand that when you're tightening, you have to picture in your head which way that screw goes. This way. That way. So whether you're upside down or sideways or forwards or whatever you're doing, you want to tighten it. You want to tighten that thing in order to take the relief out. And I'll talk about the various types of truss rods and all that, because sometimes you'll loosen a truss rod all the way up, truss rod nut, all the way up. It can be completely loose and you won't get any relief, and that's because the neck was built with tight frets or whatever. A one-way truss rod won't always put relief into a neck. I don't want relief anyway, so I don't know why I'd put relief into it, but if it was backbowed, I'd be trying to get it flatter. It is strictly dependent upon the tension of the strings pulling that up. So should I use heavier strings to create more relief? Well, I wouldn't, because I want to use the gauge of strings that I want to use for my fingers, or for the guitar. So I wouldn't go using gauge of strings to adjust the relief. I would use the gauge of strings that I want and get the neck to work with those. But that is a question that comes up a lot. Lefty loosey or righty tighty. And the reason I say this is because I have seen people snap bolts off because they had the wrench down here and lefty-loosey. No, you're tightening it right now. Pow! Bust. So we just don't work on that. I taught my son that when he was starting to work on things. I said, you've got to visualize it, which way that goes, going in, and this way is coming out. And if you ever have any question whatsoever, you put your wrench and pretend to take your gas cap off with it, or take this bottle off with it. So, see, I would set this bottle up like this and pretend that this was the rod and this was the nut, and which way do I want to turn it to tighten it. So that's just, I wouldn't suggest using a bottle of liquid like this. I would suggest using an empty jar or something like that. So just set it up straight and figure out which way it needs to go. So that's just one little tip. Okay. The second tip is a playing tip, or the other tip is a playing tip. Now, I haven't played guitar, in like months, because I've been moving and everything.